Hello and welcome back to this edition of Daily Actives brought to you by Bootleg Macro. I am Dustin. This is the show where we look at the most active stocks in Yahoo Finance every single day. We're going to be diving in. This is going to be a morning edition, so this will be right before the open. The open is in about 90 minutes, but we'll be reviewing the most active stocks from the previous day. So we're going to start with open. Open continues to be one of those stocks that I know has got the fervor of the message boards as well as the spin twits and the people all on Reddit. So if we are looking at what happened yesterday, it was down 62 basis points. If you watch my video from a couple of days ago, I did talk about what I think is happening here in open. One of the most important things to understand is first off, you want to look at where it is in the range. If you don't use ranges the way that I do, think about like a Bollinger Band, think about a standard deviation, think about like trade ranges. I create trade ranges. I have my own custom, essentially it's proprietary, but the concept is still pretty much the same. That the price of the movement, or actually the price of the stock, starts to create essentially a probabilistic range of where things can go. The top of the range is the red line, the bottom of the range is the green line. I call them a sell top and buy bottom. You can call them the top, you can call them the bottom, you can call them whatever you want. Hard pause. But one of the things that's most important is just to understand where we're coming from. When we look at open, the moves that we've seen very recently, especially over, I would say, the past 3 months, have been pretty exaggerated. Obviously, this thing was down at 73 cents. Now it's up at $8. It closed at 801 yesterday. The thing that I like when I'm looking at this is that first I can see that there is a very bullish trend. When you see these green bars underneath, that means bullish trend. That's the bullish signal that you can see right here. If it was red, that means we saw a red or a bearish signal. Now, this is essentially in the very middle of its range. The thing that I like in terms of, even though the price has been coming down, is that the range, while it's expanded, is starting to consolidate a little bit. When you get consolidation in a range, that generally is an indication that there are bigger things to come. The unfortunate part for people who are trading this right now is that the size of the range indicates that we've still got quite a bit of time to go until the range can get consolidated enough to give another big explosion move. You can look back in here, what was happening in July, and then you can see it really tightened into the middle of August. We got another explosion to the top, and then the price moved significantly over the course of the next month. I would expect something similar like that, similar to that to happen in open, but we will continue to monitor and pay attention. When we look at the chart, obviously the candles are actually pretty boring here. You're really not seeing a lot of movement. You are seeing a lot of volume. Actually, I'll take that part back. We are not seeing a lot of volume in the time when we're seeing that the price is not really moving. That's actually a good indication. The reason why is because you want to see low volume when you're getting counter trend moves. Now, this green line tells us that this is essentially a very bullish pattern, well, bullish sentiment. So this green line represents essentially what these green bars do, but it's just on a candlestick chart. The thing that's really nice is that while the price has been relatively low here in terms of the movement, and when I say low, I mean like small ranges. I mean, you're talking it moved 4 cents there, moved 4 cents there, moved 11 cents there, moved 5 cents yesterday. These are not the type of moves that would be indicative of anything massive, but they are indicative that the bullish momentum is continuing because you're getting very low volume. We're getting 146 million shares traded or 147 million shares traded yesterday on an average of 216 million. So that is relatively positive for the bullish case. We start to look at the sentiment. The sentiment indicator here is essentially a breakdown of what percentage of the price action is bullish or bearish. It's obviously every single day you have to get 100% of something. So right now we are at what looks like 53% bullishness. We are still above that black line, which is very positive. In the short term, though, on 3 weeks or 3 weeks or less, the 15-day moving average here, essentially, we are down at 44% bullishness. We're going to need to see that resume back up above the 50% line for there to be any resumption of bullishness, even in the longer term. Now, I did talk about volatility just to kind of start this off. We looked at the ranges. Something that's important to me is the way that I calculate volatility. So you'll notice this is not how traditional volatility is calculated. The reason why is because it's zero bounded, so it cannot go below zero. The reason why I like that is because I believe that when I'm seeing bullish breakouts or bearish breakouts, generally trend will reveal itself when volatility is falling in this model, and we are starting to see volatility falling. That is something that's very positive to me because when volatility is falling, generally trend will reveal itself. And what I want to see is that the price to volatility correlation is actually negative. So you can see that this is the price to volatility correlation. It is slightly negative and getting hopefully a little bit more negative. The reason why is because when you have falling volatility and negative correlation, generally the price will go sideways to up because if you've learned anything about two negatives, they generally make a positive. So I want to see this correlation continue to get really negative while I see that volatility falling. Now, if the volatility starts to break out and correlation is negative, that would mean that we're seeing massive down moves. So I do not expect that. Right here, what we have is we have this as standard volatility, the way that it's calculated. So the volatility has obviously been very, very high inside of open very recently because the price went from 73 cents up to $8 in a relatively short period of time. So I'm not going to pay attention to that. Now, all of this is underlined by actual data. That's how all this is generated. This is the data table that I essentially use. The important parts here are if you're looking at this price, this close price and volume color guide. So when you're seeing the price here with a green background with a black lettering, that means it's in the middle of its standard deviation range, essentially, the middle of the trade range. So in the normal range at the moment. Now, same thing for the volume. Excuse me. We're starting to see the volume. Obviously, it kind of got to a moderately low point here on the 29th and the 26th of September as we started into the end of the month. So I would say that I'd like to see potentially a shot taken here in terms of the price resuming above the trade level. The trade level is 831. It is still continuing to rise. But with this price now below, it'll start to come down a little bit over the next few days if this consolidates in this position. Now, the one thing that I do love is that we still continue to have a higher low at the bottom of the range. I'd like to see a higher high, but that'll take some time. If we start to look at just what I think is generally, if you wanted the easiest way, in my opinion, to pay attention to trend, I would be looking at either the 1 month or the 3 month. Now, when you're looking at something like Open, obviously a 3 month of 986% is quite exaggerated relative to what most stocks are going to do. So we do see ourselves still negative on the 1 day, 5 day, 15 day, but positive on the 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, and 1 year. Again, I'd probably be paying attention in something like this more to the 1 month. I'd want to make sure that 1 month stays above 0% because if it flips under 0% and goes negative, that would be kind of concerning to me, at least in the short term. The 3 month is still going to be very positive for a while here. Let's go ahead and look at Intel next. INTC. If you haven't been trading Intel, which I can tell you right now, I have not been, I feel like an idiot. The reason why I feel like an idiot for not trading Intel is just because, let's be honest, if the US government, if Donald Trump, if the administration, if there is national security implications, you can't see my hands, but that is completely in quotations. If there are national security interests here, this thing has the bid. It's going to be able to get easier deals. It's going to be able to get easier capital. It's going to be able to be in the news easier. So right now you can see that there's been a complete transition. And I'm going to look at the 1 year data on Intel. What did we see? Essentially, this thing did nothing. The top of the range was at $25 here. It was at $22 here, $25 here. So like even over the course of the year before the news that the US government took a, I don't know, 15% or 9% or whatever position. I don't really read the news. I pay attention to the data. Before we saw that, Intel was essentially lifeless. Now that we've seen that, and I'm going to go ahead and look at the 6 month, now that we've essentially seen that since it looks like the very middle of September, this thing has broken out. And very much to what I talked about in Open, you saw the range get really expanded here. You saw some volatility increase, you saw it get really tight, and then there was a move with the price above the top of the range. And now the top of the range continues to scream higher. The price continues to follow it. These are incredibly bullish signs just from a range perspective, without thinking about sentiment, without thinking about volume, without thinking about true volatility. This is an incredible setup when you're thinking about something longer term. You can even see it on the candlestick chart. Obviously, we see the gap up, we see a little bit of a comeback and then continuation. Huge. As I mentioned earlier in Open, I love when you're getting bullish movement on high volume. Obviously, the big day was when we saw that the US government took a position, but you can see that even as we're getting resumptions moving higher, we're getting on high volume. The average volume here, it looks like it's 101 million over the past 6 months. We are consistently above that with 150, 120. $100+ million or 100 plus million shares traded each day. Now, if we're going to go ahead and look at the daily sentiment, the thing that I'd say is the most fascinating to me is that this really hasn't gone bullish. So when we look at the daily sentiment indicator, we are just barely over 52% right now. We have been hovering just around the 50% line, even a little bit lower. Even on the day on the 17th, when we saw that there was an incredible move, we were only at 45% bullishness. So there is a lot of room to run in terms of the bullish momentum that could happen inside of the stock. On the 15-day, obviously we're running ahead of that. We're at 57% bullishness right now. So on the daily, we're only at 52%, very, very positive. The thing that's really interesting, I mentioned this in Open, is that I believe that trend reveals itself in falling volatility. The thing is that if you look here on the 7th, it was falling volatility to the 17th, which if we go back, that was the big day. So essentially, like the 17th was the big day where you really started to see a complete transition. The difference here was that this was probably going to go bearish until it got the government to take intervention in it, because then you see the volatility reset from a very high level. Volatility is breaking out. Correlation is slightly negative, starting to go positive. While it's doing that, that's how you're getting gap ups, because the volatility and the correlation are now both positive with each other. Obviously, traditional volatility is very wonky when you have government intervention. Things get all messed up there. So if we're looking at the data table, the one thing that I'd say is making this relatively difficult to trade is that we have not come out of this moderately high or significantly high range here in the price. The volume continues to come back into the normal range, which you'd expect. The thing that's going to be a little difficult is that the trade level is still all the way back at 29.10. The top of the range is at 40.48. I do love that I continue to see the higher highs. I believe that higher highs in the top of the range, as well as the bullish trend and above the trade level. If you get those three keys, essentially what you're going to be looking for, and I'm just going to break this down in Intel really quickly, is that when you're looking at what we consider to be like a transition from bearish to bullish, or bullish to bearish, what you're going to look at first is you're going to have a sentiment. And I'm sure we can find it in here. What you're going to look at first is you're going to have something where you go bearish. Usually what ends up happening before you go bullish is that you get above the trade level while it's still bearish. And then what ends up happening is that it flips bullish, and then you start to see higher highs. And then what you're going to get is most likely a price to rise inside of the future price path, because this is essentially using the correlation of volatility and the price correlation to determine what we would expect the future price path to be. The reason why I do that is because I believe, this is just the way that I believe, not everybody has to have the same belief, that the second derivatives of price, so looking at volatility and then the correlation of price to volatility, that's a third derivative. Once you get an abstraction, once you get away from the price and you start to look at some of the underlying metrics that are driving price, those things are really difficult to slow down. It's really difficult to get volatility to continue to essentially to go from this 7.8 down to like 0. The reason why is because it's like a ship at sea. Once you get a little bit of momentum, it just kind of continues to glide. There's nothing to necessarily stop it because it's just price. So when we're looking at what's going on in Intel, right now, I would say I have a little concerns because the trade level is so much further away than the close. What I would hope for is that we get a little bit of like reduction in the price movement and we get back to the normal range. The price doesn't have to move down. It could stay above 35. The trade level is going to catch up slowly over time. We could kind of let the range reassess and readjust, and then it could get back in the normal range. But it is really positive on the 1 day all the way through the 1 year. These are very positive signs for what we see in Intel. I'm going to skip. Actually, I'm going to go to RGTI. This will take a second. The reason I'm going to cover it today is because it was up 18.5% yesterday. That's a remarkable move, as well as the volume, it looks like was 3 times what it normally is. This thing only has a market cap of 11.4 billion, so I am very interested to see what this is. And if we look at it on the 52-week move, this thing is up 4,400%. So this is going to be an incredible move. I imagine that this is going to be AI related. Now, when I'm thinking about from an AI perspective, the theme of what is dominating the market is more important than the actual company itself generally. The reason why I say that is because most people are buying zero DTE options now. Most of the trading is algorithmic, and most of the trading is going to be factor based, which means they're going to be looking for momentum. They're going to be looking for small caps. They're going to be looking for things that are based off of what is going on in the market itself. And then those are the things that are going to get purchased. Let me go ahead and do this on a 6-month chart. So this is a fascinating chart to me. The reason why is, again, I continue to talk about, and what I did through Open and through Intel is that when you get a big move, the volatility or the price range will get really wide. It'll get really narrow. This is usually setting up for a phase transition. You can see it was bearish here to bullish. Now, as it starts to break out, you can start to see that we're getting a little bit of movement, but something really specific must have happened on the 12th. Again, I don't read the news. I don't pay attention to it. I don't have time for that because I have to code that. Well, I was coding this. Now I'm not doing that anymore. This is done. But when we look at the price has essentially been screaming at the top of the range. It did a little bit of consolidation here in the middle at the very end of September. The top of the range continues to go and the price is continuing to follow. Now the bottom of the range is going to start coming up to kind of close that. When we look at the chart, we can see this thing's been incredibly bullish. These moves that we're seeing, this 15, or I mean, this is probably after hours move as well, but the 18.59% in a day is pretty crazy, especially for something this small. I'm sure there's people watching this who are like, this is the greatest trade I've ever made in my entire life. I'm gonna buy a house. Maybe, maybe not. Be cautious because these kinds of moves, while they can be aggressive up, they can be aggressive down as well. I'd say the thing that I love is that the type of move that we're seeing in the price here is being accompanied by really high volume. The average volume here has been 64 million shares over the past 9 months. You can see that it was up at 147 million just yesterday, or 146 million. That probably takes into account after hours volume as well. When we look at the actual sentiment here, what's interesting is that, yes, of course, we broke up above the 50% line, but we were way up there. Like, I do like that it essentially topped out at 66%. This indicator, because it's 100% and it's a essentially, I don't even know what to do, stacked indicator. I don't know. I just like it. It's 100% relative. You can see it never gets up to 100%, never gets down to 0%, and essentially will hover between 70 would be the highest that I'd see most likely in a penny stock for bullishness, and then 30 would be the lowest I'd see for in terms of bullishness. At 66%, and then coming back down to the 61%, and now being at 64% today, I feel very. I get the inclination that things are going to slow down for a little here, unless there's major news to accompany it. You look at it on the 15-day, we're down at 68% bullishness. Again, this thing, the volatility has been absolutely insane. This is the highest volatility that we've seen going all the way back to, it looks like, the first of the year. We're up at, it looks like 10.6. The correlation, look at this. The correlation was incredibly negative while the volatility was breaking out. Now the correlation as the price moves completely flips. What's interesting is that what I talked about in Intel in terms of the way that a second derivative can move. What's interesting about this to me is that when you get moves like this in price, where you're starting to come down and then you get an explosion higher from either a news or some sort of external event, it will completely flip the second derivatives. So that's telling me that price is leading the second derivatives at the moment, which is good in my opinion because we are peaking. And the reason why I say that is because I believe, again, trend reveals itself when you get falling volatility. So we're about to get to probably the top of the volatility over the next like week or so here, and it should start to fall down. That correlation isn't incredibly positive. So if it starts to go negative, again, the price would go sideways to up. Very curious to see what happens here in Rigetti or Rig. I don't even know the RGTI. Very interesting as well from a data perspective. The reason why is because you can look. If we're scrolling back, the last day that this was in the normal range was on the first, so that was really the data buy. Yes, it was quite a ways away in the trade level, but you did have a higher high. You continue to see that this thing's essentially been moderately high as well as significantly high. And then even on the 19th, extremely high. Those are the type of moves that are just indicative of something that is going to be, that has thematic, which, and when I say thematic, what I mean is that essentially, like the market is talking about AI. This is probably related to AI. The market is looking at switching into small caps and momentum. This is probably a small cap and momentum considering it's an $11 billion stock. These are the type of things that are just giving you indications that the wind is at your back and something like this. Again, I wouldn't buy it until it's in the normal range, until you get a green background with a black lettering, but that's just a me thing. Some people have a higher risk tolerance. I prefer to keep the money that I've made and I want to just compound it a little bit. So when we look at what we're seeing, we are now positive on a 1 day all the way through the 1 year. We now have the future price path, price to rise. Again, I'm going to cover what that comes from. That is the correlation between the volatility as well as the price correlation. So if this is rising, if the volatility is rising and the price correlation is positive, that would tell you that you'd expect the future price path to rise. So that's essentially why and how I look at Rigetti. I don't think that's how you say it, but tell me in the comments below if I'm saying it even close to right. Let's go ahead and look at Tesla now. Tesla continues to be one of the most interesting stocks of the entire year as well. The reason why is because if we look at it, let's look at it from just the 1 year. This thing came in essentially a little bullish, got bearish, got very, very bullish into the election, got very, very bullish as Doge took over, or very, very bearish as Doge took over. And then you can see we started to get essentially consolidation where we got a very tight range here. We got a big breakout, it looks like on the 11th, September 11th, RIP, never forget. You can see as well, we start to look at the actual candles. This is the thing. And I've said this in previous videos, Tesla is blessed by the volatility gods. If you're looking for vol, Tesla is the game in town. It is going to show you everything. Now, the setup for today, I would say I'm probably not going to expect very much out of Tesla, only because the top of the range is starting to roll over. It's probably moderately high if we go down. Let's see where it is. Actually, no, it is in its normal range at 436. This is probably, in my opinion, today is probably going to be a decent place for me to be looking at taking a shot at Tesla. While the range is now coming up to 410, the close is at 433. We're probably going to see, yesterday, obviously, the price was down significantly. It was down 5.1%. We do see a lower high in the top of the range. Not concerned about that. We still see a lower high, we still see a higher low. So things, the bottom is coming up, the top is coming down, but there's consolidation. I feel very comfortable because it is still incredibly bullish. We can see right here from a volume perspective, the volume was really high yesterday relative to itself at 135 million shares traded. Let's go ahead and look at that. I'm going to make this the 6-month chart just because it's a little bit easier to see on the video. We can see here, yeah, we saw 135 million. We do see generally that Tesla obviously has a high bid. So there's 100 million shares traded normally over the past 6 months. 136 million shares traded while the down day is not really positive. But again, because Tesla's been blessed by the volatility gods, not quite sure if that's necessarily negative or positive. Let's go ahead and look at the sentiment. We can see here we're at 65% bullishness. Tesla is so fascinating to me because this thing has been essentially above its 50% line since the middle of April. Yeah, it touched down at 49% in the second, but really that doesn't count in my opinion because you need, the thing that I want to see is going to be 2 days of confirmation. I want to see 2 full days of confirmation, so back-to-back days. So like right here, you're seeing 49.5, 49.8, 49. I would probably just round these 49.5 up to 50, the 49.8 up to 50, and you get 1 day that's confirmed 50 at 49. But every other day, essentially back to the second or the end of April, has essentially been bullish in Tesla. Very indicative of the type of moves we've been seeing in Tesla for the past like 5 or 6 years. The volatility is, it looks like it's probably hopefully cresting. The reason why I say hopefully cresting is if we're going to get a really big move in volatility, it's most likely going to be down right now. So what I want to see is this continue to roll over. I want to see this correlation continue to stay negative, and then I would expect the price to go sideways to up. These are really positive signs for Tesla. Obviously, you'd expect a little bit of consolidation, and anything that can move 5% on something on a company that is 1.4 trillion. That is a massive move in terms of actual money. But Tesla has hopefully better things to come as the market has continued to transition to a bullish momentum. Let's go ahead and look at Nvidia. Nvidia, full disclosure, I do own positions in Nvidia. If you go back and watch any of my previous videos, I talked about Nvidia about 10 days ago. I talked about Nvidia, yeah, 10 days ago, but I talked about Nvidia 2 months ago because it's the most popular stock that exists right now. Because obviously, when I continue to talk about themes of AI, momentum, this isn't small cap, this has been large cap, but what you can tell is that this has been continuing to get the bid for a very long time. Nvidia continues to show that it has resilience. The reason why I say that is because over the past 9 months, we've seen this thing go bearish here. We've seen it flip bullish. And just most recently, even right now, Nvidia is still technically bearish based on the moves that we've seen. Now, if you watch my video from 10 days ago, what I was thinking was that we were going to get, I don't really believe in like charts or I don't know what you call them, like formations or whatever, like the cup and handle or the basing or anything like that. Because I do believe that ultimately price just does what it does, regardless of what people think it's going to do. When we're looking at this chart, though, the thing that I like is that we've essentially seen what you consider to be like a little consolidation here from it looks like the very middle of August all the way through now. We're probably about to break out to a higher high. I would like to see Nvidia get all the way up to over 200. I think it needs to clear. It definitely needs to clear 190 and close in the mid 190 for us to believe that this bullishness is going to continue. It's interesting because the volume has been down. So that's really fascinating to me that the volume has essentially not really been breaking it higher. But if we take out, I'm going to go and look at the 6 months specifically here for volume. We're still at 194 million shares traded on average, but that's just based on what we saw back in April. That's going to drop off pretty quickly here over the next week or so. The average will come back down, and then this 135 million shares is going to look like it's closer to the average. 175 million is going to be higher. 236 million obviously going to be above the previous average volume, as well as probably what the future one is, depending on when the data set changes. When we look here, we finally broke above bullishness. We're finally at 51% bullishness inside of Nvidia. It was bearish, or at least majority bearish in terms of its sentiment since the very end of August, which I know most people were not expecting. But if you were investing during that time, it was very positive because now you're looking at higher highs and you were kind of essentially dollar cost averaging in. What we can see here too is we're looking at 50% on the 15-day. Again, the type of moves we're seeing in NVIDIA tell me that we have a lot more to go, actually. As crazy as that sounds, again, I don't pay attention to valuation. I could really, truly give a shit less about it. So I don't think that matters in a market where you're having zero DTE options, you're having mostly algorithmic trading. And when you're having retail takeover, people don't care what a valuation is. They care about what the stock price is. So what I like as well is that we're starting to see a resetting of the volatility. The volatility has reset at zero bounded on the 29th. It's starting to break out. The correlation is negative, but it's not incredibly negative. Like if it was super negative, you'd see it with red lines here. What we're looking at here is that we're kind of hovering around, which means that I very easily believe that this could go positive while the volatility starts to break out. What I would expect that means is we're going to see some sort of like gap up inside of Nvidia, which is going to be nuts to see if you think about how much money that actually is. Right now, when it comes to price, we are moderately high. For the past 2 days, we've been significantly high on the very end of September. The volume has been dropping, though. That's what's really interesting. Volume has been dropping. We can see this thing is still very bearish. And actually, if you're looking at this part of the video and didn't watch my part around Open or Intel, I wanted to cover just what I'm talking about in a transition from bearish to bullish. This is obviously transitioning to bullish. The reason I know that, excuse me, the reason I know that is because this thing has been very, very bearish since the very middle of August, as I continue to mention. You can see it was below its trade level. You can see it was fighting to be above its trade level here for about 4 days. Went back below, then it started to break up above the top of its trade level while continuing to maintain bearishness. Now we are looking at in the middle of September. This thing broke above the top of the trade level on the 18th when it went to 174 or 176 above 175. Continues to stay bearish, but now that trade level, we are above it consistently. That's what the green means. When the price is green in the trade level, that means that the price is above it. So what I'm expecting is that this is the first signal. Is that first we break up above the trade level. The sentiment should be the next thing. Okay, should go bullish, and then we're going to start seeing higher highs at the top of the range. That's why I'm very, very bullish about the idea that I'm seeing 192. I want to see the 190s. I want to see the 200s in the top of the range, and where the price closes. If we get to the top of the range at 192, the top of the range is probably going to be around 198 or something like that, depending on how we get there. I'm very positive on the 1 day all the way through the 1 year. Again, if you don't have something like this or you haven't used this, but you can use this for free if you're interested, you can just go ahead and sign up at traderatings.com. You can use your Twitter to log in or your Gmail. I do give you 30 stocks you can look at every single day for free. If you want to do $20, you'll get access to other things, specifically like I think you get the G20 cryptocurrencies, today's trades, and stuff like that. But what I highlight is that if you don't have this, I would essentially just look at the 3-month rolling return. If we go all the way back, the 3-month rolling return was never negative. Even when we were bearish in August and early September, the 3-month rolling return was still positive, even though the 1 month was negative. So these are the type of moves that I'd be paying attention to is the 3-month rolling return. I think the 1 month rolling return is very indicative of like setting up for trades, but the 3-month rolling return I think is very indicative of what you're looking at for a trend. Let's go ahead and look at plug. Plug is a stock that I have talked about from time to time. Again, if you go back and watch my videos from last week, I talked about Plug 9 days ago, I talked about Plug yesterday, I talked about Plug 2 days ago, or 10 days ago. Plug's an interesting stock because it is a trash company generally. And I don't mean like the company, the products, the people, anything like that. I mean it from the perspective of like, where does this thing actually go as a stock? What's fascinating to me is that you're seeing the resumption of Plug. And when Plug is running, that says a lot about the overall economy. The reason why is because it says to me that small caps are working, it says that the momentum is working. It says that there's liquidity coming into the market, specifically attacking small caps. Now, if we're looking at Plug, again, you're seeing something that I've been talking about in each one of the previous stocks we reviewed. You're getting a breakout. You're seeing the volatility expand, so the range expands. You're getting consolidation. You get a resumption of breakout. Then when you get price that breaks up above the top of the range, like we saw here on the 22nd, very indicative of good things to come. But when the price breaks above the top of the range, usually you expect some consolidation like we saw here into the 30th. Now the range continues to run. The top of the range is now higher. It looks like at 329. The price has hit all the way to 293. And it's doing it on very high volume. So I'm very positive on what I'm seeing in Plug, even though I wouldn't necessarily buy it, just because I don't like playing in things that have such high volatility. But you know what? Some people love that shit. So if we're looking at the sentiment here, you can see we're well above the 50% line. We're well above the 50% line on the 15-day as well. The volatility is resetting higher. The correlation is slightly negative, so it's going to be a lot of chop unless we get that correlation to volatility to go positive as well. I would hope that this would start to roll over. The volatility itself. The volatility starts to roll over, as I continue to say, a trend exposes itself when volatility rolls over. If the volatility can roll over, this can stay negative. We'd probably go sideways to up. Let's go ahead and look at the data table. What's interesting to me is that we've had a resumption of 2 of the days where we are moderately high. We're just slightly outside of the normal range. The best day to buy Plug was going to be on the 29th and the 30th here. It looks like we are well above the trade level. We're very, very bullish. We've got higher highs. We are positive on the 5-day all the way through the 1 year. I wouldn't be paying attention to the 1-day moves in Plug unless you want to use it as an opportunity to purchase, only because with something as volatility like this, something as a price like this, and the market is trading like this, you're going to see crazy moves. You're going to see whipsaws in the morning. You're going to see down opens, big up closes, and essentially that is, if you want the easiest thing to pay attention to if you're in a bull market, does the market open down and close up? Does it open weak and close strong? In a bear market, it will open strong and close weak. That is not what we're seeing. When Plug is running, again, that is indicative of the market running itself. Let's go ahead and look at Snap real quick. Big fan of Snap. And there's like, excuse me, again, not as a company, not as the people, not as the product, not as anything, just as the stock. What I like about it is that essentially what we're seeing right now is that we've seen massive volatility. We've seen this thing up at $12 a year ago. We see it around $8 now. Now the volatility may not seem like a big deal, but if you're going from $12 to $8, okay, you're down 30%. So the move that we're seeing here, when we go from the 15th when we're at $7, right? We flip bullish. The price breaks out above the top of the range. The range continues to, it's not screaming higher. If I wanted to see something really positive in Snap, I'd want to see it like scream higher, similar to what we just saw in Plug. I'd want to see the top of the range screaming up to $12, $10, something like that. It's kind of just hovering, which is good. It means that we're not seeing incredibly aggressive volatility, which means that some of the moves could continue to run. The problem here is the chart. Now, again, I don't pay attention to formations. I'm not paying attention to patterns very much, but the gaps are significant because no matter what you believe about like a triangle or wedge or whatever you're doing or basing, gaps do need to get filled because that's an air pocket where there's a lot of people who bought back here in May that have stock in there. And once you start to fill that gap, those people are going to be like, God, I've been down for months. I need to get out of here and finally break even. That's what you'll usually see. The thing that's nice about what we're seeing in terms of some of this bullish movement is the high volume. The concerning thing would be that we're also seeing high volume when we're getting the selling, but because that was a gap here in August and all of these people in May, June, April that essentially want to get out without losing any money, that's the problem that you're going to see. It's essentially a lot of turnover of shares. If we look at the sentiment, I do like that we're above the 50% line on the daily sentiment. We're at 52.8. On the 15-day, we're at 56. We're starting to get the rollover and volatility, which I think is really important. Again, we have a negative correlation, so I'd expect this to go sideways to up. Let's go ahead and look at the price. This is in the middle of the range in terms of the normal perspective of the way that I look at it. So we've been in the normal range. It would be better to buy it at 771 than 822, but beggars can't be choosers if you haven't bought it yet. Again, we see this continues to be bullish. We can see that this is now resumed above the top of its trade level. We are positive on the 1-day, 5-day, and 1 month. I don't necessarily think this is great because we're still negative on the 3-month, but we are continuing to see this go in the right direction. We were down 17% yesterday, 16% 2 days ago. Now we're down at 9.8%. I don't know what's going to happen in Snap. No one ever does. But right now, it's indicative that the market is continuing to run. Let's go ahead and look at one last stock here. What was the most? What stock was up the most? Let's go ahead and look at Ondas. What's Ondas? I don't know what this is. ONDS. Let me go. Just gonna go ahead and refresh. There we go. Now we're gonna go look at what is this? ONDS? Okay. ONDS. I don't know what this is. I do not look at news. I do not look at small stocks. I generally am looking at 25 stocks and the largest stocks. We're gonna go ahead and see what this looks like. ODOT Ondas. This thing was up 25.9% in a day. I don't know. It's only $3 billion. Okay. I am very curious about what this thing has been doing because the type of moves you're going to see in something like this, yeah, that is a ridiculous move. A ridiculous move. When I look at this is essentially like perfection to me. The reason why is because this is the whole point of why I made this app was to look and find things like this, where you have essentially very low prices, you get a little bit of a breakout, you get high consolidation, and you get essentially what is like a stealth bull market. You want stealth bull markets because these low volatility, high movement kind of stocks, this is what it looks like when something has incredibly good bullish momentum. Low volatility bullish market or bull markets are the best markets to trade in because that shows you that volatility, that it is not just momentum, it is a thematic, like general narrative, either around the market itself or the stock. There's really nothing negative to say about what I'm seeing in the trend here. The reason is what I like is that you're getting moves that are big at the time, but are not overly accentuated, right? You're getting a bullish move above the top of this range. You're getting like a little consolidation. You're seeing its bullish sentiment the entire time. The price is coming down to the bottom of the range, right into the middle. It's breaking out above the top of the range. It's consolidating to sort of the middle. It's breaking up. It's continuing to follow along at the top of the range. Even yesterday, while you may think that the previous day was kind of ugly, I'm sure it was down. Getting to the top of the range, it most likely today is going to come backwards, just to call that out, just because we're already at the top of the range. The volume is insane though. Like the thing that I love is that the higher highs are on higher volume. So like this is the highest high we've seen in this amount of time, highest volume. Now we look at the bullishness. This bullishness is again not really crazy. Like you're getting at 64%. You got one really high one here at 70%. You're getting at 67%. We're only at 56% bullishness on the looking at essentially the 1 month. On the 3 week, we're only at 54%. The volatility has been bonkers because this thing has been so low vol. I would expect the volatility to continue to fall a little bit, but it really doesn't matter because the correlation is so high while the volatility is high that this is essentially one of those stocks that can just go up and to the right until it can't. It's interesting to me because again, I can see that yesterday was not yesterday, 2 days ago when it was down 5.3%. That was when it was in the middle of the range. It was in its normal range at that point. So if we go back and look at the chart, this is what I mean. This price here, when it was at 731, that dip when it was down 5%, that brought it back into the middle of the range. That just shows you how aggressive this thing is. When the top of the range is that high, obviously it's nice because the trade level continues to rise. It is at 688, which I expect a snapback. The price is at 921, which is significantly high right now. The volume was also significantly high on that move, which is really positive. You want to see the price breakout on high volume when you're getting a move that's like 29 or 25% or 26% for the day like that. That's huge. We have a higher high in the top of the range. We're positive from the 1 day all the way to the 1 year. I like what I'm seeing in Ondas. I don't know, whatever, but it looks good from a price perspective. The data looks great. If you like these videos, you can go ahead and follow me on Twitter. I don't have many followers. People don't really follow me. You can follow me on YouTube, which is probably where you're seeing this video. I've made nearly 300 videos. I only have 164. So I think this is high quality content if you like to look at market. If you're interested in crypto, I do it. You can get the free weekly one, which comes out on Saturdays at 11. If you want a daily one, it comes out at 7:15. It is $10 a month. You even get a 7 day free trial. That's like literally just try it if you want. It comes out at 6:15 East Coast time. I need to update that. I think that's 6:15. I'm Central time. If you do the free one, it comes out at 11 a.m. East Coast time. So you'll get it. It comes with an entire listing of what we are looking at in terms of the crypto market. I'm just going to very quickly just show you what I have here. So like this is what it looks like. I get this every morning sent to myself. Essentially, it gives me an idea of what's going on in crypto. It uses the exact same price and volume guide. So you get the price of whatever it is. You need to add the zeros on a Bitcoin because my data provider, you get the sentiment, you get the 1 day, 5 day, and 1 month. You get the trade level as well as the buy and sell. So the top of the range. If you're interested in seeing this, you can always go here as well. If you're like, oh, I actually want to see what the data looks like, there is a link that brings you in there. You actually end up getting access to this page too, the crypto page. So what you're able to see is all these individual cryptos essentially updated with their close price, their volume. You can see the sentiment, you can see the trade level. Very similar to what I've just reviewed. You also do get the percentage from the buy bot on the sell top. And if you're interested, you can go ahead and set alerts for like when the price goes above something or when a metric changes. So like if sentiment changes or if it gets really close to the bottom of its range or anything like that. Again, it's just included. I think it's a great product. It's only $10. If you're interested, you get a 7-day free trial. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Are you long? Are you short? Do you like it? Do you love it? Is this even a good review? I'll talk to you soon.